We're continuing in the book of First Samuel, and this is probably the most well-known part of the book of First Samuel, which is First Samuel 16 through 18, and we're reading in the NIV. My name is David. This is Read the Bible in 1 year. We're going Genesis to Revelation this year, and definitely going to do it before December 31st. Let's say probably, most likely going to do it before December 31st, as you'll see in the Read the Bible in 1 year guide in the description below. So make yourself a copy, check it off as we go along. But this, I'm just reading through the titles in the 3 chapters that we're reading today, is about David, where Samuel anoints David to be king after King Saul has been rejected and God chooses to move on from him. And we're going to read about David and Goliath, and then some of the turmoil that started to take place between David and King Saul. So we're going to get right into it. And before we do, let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your goodness and your grace. Make this word come alive to us today. We're so thankful, God, that you give us access so freely and so easily. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to have a lot to talk about. I didn't plan it, but I'm just assuming there's going to be a lot to talk about, all right? I'm going to give you some of the things that I have insight on, not necessarily because I know it front to back, but just from times I've read in the past. Verse 1, the Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I've chosen one of his sons to be king." But Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me." The Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate." Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, "Do you come in peace?" Which is kind of an interesting way to greet a prophet, right? Do you come in peace? And to me, that goes to show how powerful and how weighty and mighty the words of Samuel were because of God's favor on his life and the way that God anointed him and used him to bring about some miraculous things and some truths that were, again, difficult to know outside of God being able to reveal it to you. So verse 5, Samuel said, "Yes, in peace, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at." And what did the scriptures describe Saul to be? Handsome and a head taller than everybody else. So already God is saying, we're not going to go that direction. That is not the way that I look at it. So the Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Verse 8, then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel, but Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse then had Shammah pass by, but Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, Are these all the sons you have?" "They are still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He's tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." So again, appearance is still described here, but God wasn't looking at appearance to judge whether this was going to be the next king or not. The Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. Samuel then went to Ramah. Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. Saul's attendants said to him, "See, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord command his servants here to search for someone who can play the lyre. He will play when the evil spirit from God comes on you, and you will feel better." So Saul said to his attendants, "Find someone who plays well and bring him to me." One of the servants answered, I've seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the lyre. He's a brave man and a warrior. He speaks well and is a fine-looking man, and the Lord is with him." Then Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, Send me your son David, who is with the sheep. So Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread, a skin of wine, and a young goat, and sent them with his son David to Saul. David came to Saul and entered his service. Saul liked him very much, and David became one of his armor bearers. Then Saul sent word to Jesse, saying, Allow David to remain in my service, for I am pleased with him. Whenever the Spirit from God came on Saul, David would take up his lyre and play. Then relief would come to Saul. He would feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. One thing I'll point out is when the Spirit of God is in you, when you are full of the Spirit of God, you will get into rooms that you have no business getting into. And one of the things that David exemplified is the way that God uses the things that we develop in secret, maybe not in secret, but out of the public eye, let's say. So maybe it's not something that you're hiding, but it's not necessarily something that you're famous for. He takes the things that you've been developing, the things that you already know how to do or that you're gifted to do. He takes all the hours that you worked on your craft and nobody was watching, the videos that you made and nobody was watching for a long time. God has shown us a tendency, especially in the life of David and through the life of David rather, of being able to take what you've developed and what he's developed in you in the secret place, in the unknown place, and elevate it and expose it at the right time, in the right place, for the right people. And in doing that, sometimes people get into a lot of fame and they become well known for being really excellent at this one thing, just like David did. Like, who would have thought, right? There was no connection outside of Samuel, and even Samuel did not announce it to everybody that he just anointed David as the next king. There wasn't a connection outside of that would indicate David was the person that would be elevated to this position of an armor bearer in Saul's service, and somebody who would, play the lyre and help soothe his battle with his kind of demons and his oppressing spirits. There was nothing to indicate that David would have been the one, but God was preparing David when he was by himself tending the sheep, when he was practicing and playing the lyre, when he was, as he would talk about later on, defending the sheep against the lion and the bear, when he was learning how to take care of things and nobody was watching him. Nobody knew what his work was about until everybody knew what his work was about, right? And so I encourage you, if you feel like you're in that place where you're looking to make it, let's say, maybe it's in a certain industry, acting, music, whatever it might be, where there's a lot of eyes that you want to get in front of, work on what you have in front of you. Stay focused on what God has entrusted you with right now in front of you, what's in your hands right now. And God will take care of the timing. God will take care of the place. God will take care of the exposure. And he'll put you in the right place at the right time in front of the right people. That's what I get from David. 1 Samuel 17, one of the most well-known stories, maybe not exactly line for line, but certainly the general story of David and Goliath. Verse 1. And we're easily going to go over 20 minutes today, just so you're aware. Verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Socoh in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim between Socoh and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah, and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out from the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span, and let's see, it says that's about 9 feet 9 inches, or about 3 meters. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze, weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Now, for those who feel like this is not possible, right, a 9'9" person, we've had records in the last century of people who were in the 8 feet, right, in the 8-foot height. Certainly, we have people playing basketball right now who are easily 7'1.5". So we've seen these outstanding sizes, but even the scriptures talk about how in Genesis, the Nephilim were these warriors of old, these legends essentially, and how they were essentially giants, right? And it doesn't go into that much detail, But it wouldn't, to me, be that surprising if 9'9" was somewhat a normal height at some point in the history of the world, or at least that there were more commonly people that were that tall. And Goliath easily could have been someone of that line. An anomaly, of course, but he could have been. I'm not at all surprised by it, let's say. It doesn't shake my faith at all. Verse 8. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had eight sons, and in Saul's time, he was very old. Jesse's three oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The three oldest followed Saul. But David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. Again, playing lyre for Saul and also tending his father's sheep. For 40 days, the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to the camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines." Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out?" That's 40 days, by the way. He comes out, that's consistency and persistence, He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel. That'd have been nice, right? Verse 26, David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the man, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." "Now what have I done?" said David. "Can I even speak?" And honestly, I think that's just like a normal brother thing. You know what I'm saying? Like between me and my brother, it's just that kind of stuff just happens. And I'm so glad the Bible catches it or recorded it, because it's like if you've ever had a brother, whether you're the older or the younger, that kind of banter is just so common. And it at least makes me confident that these were real people and they were trying to record these events as they actually happened. But anyway, that's such a older brother to a younger brother thing, and then a younger brother type of response. Like, what did I do? Right? Can I even talk? Verse 30, when he then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Now imagine this, for 40 days, nobody, all the men, all the warriors, nobody came up to Saul offering themselves to be the one to fight the Philistine, to fight Goliath, the 9'9". Okay, that's again based on what was said there. The 9-foot giant. Let's just say the giant. Nobody in 40 days was willing, courageous enough, and confident enough to go up against him. Verse 33. Well, here comes David, right? The youngest, probably not even the most fully formed or fully developed physically. but he's the one who's like, I'm going to go and fight him. Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear." First of all, how crazy is that? I did not even know that bears would be ones to hunt sheep and lions. I can imagine that, but like both the lion and the bear, he encountered them, fought them, and killed both of them. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. So listen to what he says. My experience with the lion and the bear gives me confidence. Confidence, not that I will be able to overcome the Philistine on my own strength, but because he, the Philistine, the Goliath, the giant, has defied the armies of the living God. So his confidence right here in verse 37, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Whenever you face a giant, and that can be, and I know we're taking it to application pretty quickly, but whenever you face a giant of any kind, financial, relational, health-wise, a mental giant in your life, an emotional giant, a loss, whenever you face a giant, your sinful addictions, your habits, your confidence is not going to come from your own ability, your own experience, and what you were able to overcome in the past. Let your confidence come from how God, and see this with this perspective, your past and your past accomplishments, your past victories against the Goliaths in your past. See those victories from the lens that David had, where he says, "The Lord is the one who rescued me." Yes, David's literal physical body was the one who was attacking and able to overcome the lion and the bear, but he recognized that that was a favor that came from God. That was grace that came from God to be able to give him the strength and the ability, the opportunity to overcome the lion and the bear. And it is the same grace and favor from God that will allow him to rescue him from the bear, from the Philistine, from the giant, that will allow him to overcome the giant and win the victory for Israel. And so Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. And you know what? Like, when you approach it from that perspective, when you approach your great big problem or issue from that perspective, you don't have to list all the ways that you think you can win. You don't have to necessarily over strategize, let's say. There's a time for planning, there's a time for strategy. But at some point, it's go time. At some point, it's time to face it head on. And at that point, all the strategizing, you internalize it, and it's not time to think as much anymore, but just to act and have confidence in God, have confidence that God is with you, and that if God is with you and he's for you, what can be against you, as it says in Romans 8. So verse 38, "Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. 'I cannot go in these,' he said to Saul, 'because I'm not used to them.' So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine." Similar to what I was saying before, like, God was always preparing David for this moment. God's preparing you right now for a future moment. It doesn't seem like what he's preparing you for is what you're doing right now, and I don't want to make that confusing, but what you're doing right now doesn't always feel like it's relevant to where you want to be. I'll say it like that. What you're doing right now doesn't feel like how is this going to get me to that place? And for me, when I started off speaking, whether it was videos or speaking at church or in a small group or just over the phone, praying in a small group as we did before, like in Zoom or something like that. Before, years ago, when I first started doing that, I didn't know that I would be making hundreds of YouTube videos. I didn't know that I would be preaching uh, pretty frequently. I wouldn't say often, but more frequently than most people that I know go to church. I didn't know that I would be doing all that. But what I did was I was building up the courage, I was building up the repetition, I was building up my own faith in Jesus. I was building up uh, the the way that I was able to connect with people in a room, right? All that stuff, I didn't, and my wife can attest to this too, and a lot of people in my life, I didn't plan to become a pastor. My dad's a pastor, but I didn't plan to become a pastor. It wasn't really within my, it wasn't necessarily one of my dreams. But when God called me, of course, I responded. But I wasn't preparing so that I could become a pastor. And so to me, like, I think back then it was more so about enjoying the moment. Like, honestly, I had no strong desires or ambitions for the future as to where I want to end up. But at some point, God started putting that stuff, that kind of desire and ambition in me, that vision He gave me for leadership in the church, and then, to become a pastor, to help people, to shepherd people, and also to preach and to speak in a way that's impactful and helpful for people. And back then, I didn't necessarily have the opportunities, although it was offered to me at the church, but I didn't necessarily have the opportunities to practice that and to do that and to be well known or something, or to be somebody that some people would want to speak at their church, or want to speak at their event. But I've had opportunities now since then. And you just never know what God is preparing you for, except that He gives you the job that you're at now, the housing situation you're in now, the relationships you're in now, and the skills that you have right now, and the opportunities you have right now. He gives you that to entrust you, to trust you with it, and see what you could do with it, see how you can develop it, see how you can make it pleasing to Him and honor Him with it. And if you just focus on that, God is going to be able to prepare you for something that you did not expect. And I would say something that seems like it's not even within the realm of your ability, but He's going to prepare you, and your confidence is not going to come from your past experience, because you never had an experience with a giant before, like David never had with a giant, but you had experience in which God came through for you. And if God came through for you then, you have confidence God's going to come through for you now, especially with the way that you were faithful with what God has entrusted you with. So don't think of anything that you're doing right now as too small or too insignificant, because you never know how God could take something like just a staff, the stones, and a sling into a war to face a giant who's carrying a sword, a shield, and a spear that's bigger than you. Like, you never know how God's going to use the seemingly insignificant, seemingly little things that He's developed in you and allowed you to go through. So don't think too small of what God has entrusted you with. Verse 41, meanwhile, the Philistine with a shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or by spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give all of you into our hands." So, boom, right there, David emphasizes what and I guess he shares what he's been thinking all along, that I'm not here actually fighting with these weapons. I'm here fighting in the name of the Lord God. My weapon is actually God's ability. It's God who's going to save. It's God who's going to deliver right now. And that's the kind of faith that we need whenever we face something incredibly difficult or a huge obstacle. Verse 48, or as people say, don't Don't tell me how, don't tell God how big your problem is. Tell your problem how big your God is. Verse 48. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. No hesitation. Verse 49. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword, with his own sword. And that sword actually is going to show up later in the story of David. So when the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Sharaim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistines' head and brought it to Jerusalem. He put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. As Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, commander of the army, Abner, whose son is that young man? Abner replied, as surely as you live, your majesty, I don't know. The king said, find out whose son this young man is. As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine's head. Whose son are you, young man? Saul asked him. David said, I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem. Which is kind of curious because Saul initially actually asked Jesse, can I keep your son with me? Because I like him in my service. So maybe it's showing a little bit of the mental decline for Saul because he was getting old as well. 1 Samuel 18. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. Whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. So that friendship between Jonathan and David is referenced quite a bit amongst Christian circles in the church, that this is one of the greatest friendships that you can read about, and how much they loved each other and looked out for each other. Verse 5. This pleased all the troops, how David was so successful, had him in a high rank. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs and with timbrels and lyres. As they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David, kind of like keep your enemies closer, right? Verse 10, the next day an evil spirit from God, came forcefully on Saul. He was prophesying in his house while David was playing the lyre as he usually did. Saul had a spear in his hand and he hurled it, saying to himself, I'll pin David to the wall. But David eluded him twice. Now let's read from verse 10 there. The next day a harmful spirit or evil spirit from God came forcefully on Saul. Now, did it literally come from God, like God sent the spirit to torment Saul? You know, the way it sounds, yeah, the way it sounds. But even in the story of Job, as we'll read in the future, Satan comes before God in God's presence and asks for permission. So in a way, even Satan was sent to Job in that sense. And I would not be surprised if the same situation or same setup here occurred, where there is a spirit that wants to torment Saul and needs God's permission. And as of course, God being sovereign has control over everything, and nothing happens unless he allows it or causes it. So very possible that's how it goes down. Verse 12, Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David, but had departed from Saul. So he sent David away from him and gave him command over 1,000 men. And David led the troops in their campaigns. In everything he did, he had great success because the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he led them in their campaigns. Saul said to David, "Here's my older daughter Merab. I will give her to you in marriage. Only serve me bravely and fight the battles of the Lord." For Saul said to himself, "I will not raise a hand against them. Let the Philistines do that." But David said to Saul, "Who am I? And what is my family or my clan in Israel that I should become the king's son-in-law?" So when the time came for Merab, Saul's daughter, to be given to David, she was given in marriage to Adriel of Meholah. Now Saul's daughter, Michal, was in love with David. And when they told Saul about it, he was pleased. "I will give her to him," he thought, "so that she may be a snare to him and so that the hand of the Philistines may be against him." So Saul said to David, "Now you have a second opportunity to become my son-in-law." And Saul ordered his attendants, "Speak to David privately and say, 'Look, the king likes you, and his attendants all love you. Now become his son-in-law.'" They repeated these words to David. But David said, "Do you think it's a small matter to become the king's son-in-law? I'm only a poor man and little known." When Saul's servants told him what David had said, Saul replied, "Say to David, the king wants no other price for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies." Saul's plan was to have David fall by the hands of the Philistines. When the attendants told David these things, he was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. So, again, seeing the kind of honor David treated that position with, being a son-in-law to the king, he wanted to treat it with a similar value. Like, don't just give it to me. Let me at least prove or give you something worth that similar value that allows me to earn that place, to earn that position. So before the allotted time elapsed, David took his men with him and went out and killed 200 Philistines. Did he ask for 100? He asked for 100, but he killed 200 Philistines and brought back their foreskins. They counted out the full number to the king so that David might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave him his daughter Michal in marriage. I think it's Michal or Michal, I'm not sure. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that his daughter Michal loved David, Saul became still more afraid of him, and he remained his enemy the rest of his days. The Philistine commanders continued to go out to battle, and as often as they did, David met with more success than the rest of Saul's officers. And as often as they did, David met with more success than the rest of Saul's officers, and his name became well known. So that's the reading for today. I know I went pretty far over, but there's a lot to talk about there. There's a lot to meditate on. Read through 1 Samuel 17 again, and just how David carried himself, how David saw things. What was his perspective? What was his worldview? How he saw even his own challenges and his own successes, that it really wasn't by his own hand, he said. It was by God's ability and by God's grace that he overcomes the lion, that he overcomes the bear, and eventually overcomes Goliath, the giant. God bless you, and I'll see you when we start reading 1 Samuel chapter 19 in the next video.